We all know the name, Marie Curie. And when you hear it, you probably get this iconic image in your head,
You know,
right?
absolutely. The woman of immense focus, in a dark lab, maybe with a sort of faint, otherworldly glow around her.
Exactly, surrounded by beakers and spectral tubes. But the real story, I mean, the one that's etched not just in history books, but in her own scarred hands.
And eventually, in her premature grave, it's a story of just relentless scientific pursuit, but also bitter political resistance and profound physical sacrifice.
And today, that's what we're doing. We are taking a deep dive into the sources covering her life, her work, and the seismic scientific changes she sparked.
It's so much more than just a great biography. I mean, her work is the story of a fundamental transformation of reality itself.
How so?
Well, she didn't just isolate a couple of new elements, she completely redefined what an element is. For centuries, the identifier was its atomic mass, something you could weigh. She, through her work on radioactivity, paved the way for changing that definition to the number of protons in the nucleus. That's not just a discovery. It's a total revolution in 20th century physics and chemistry.
So our mission today is to really extract the most insightful, maybe the most surprising facts about how this Polish physicist and chemist achieved such unparalleled fame.
And, crucially, what it cost her. What that singular achievement cost her, her family. Scientifically, personally, and physically.
We have sources detailing her early struggles, this incredible partnership she forged with Pierre, the almost unimaginable conditions of her research.
Poisonous conditions.
Yeah, and the immense enduring global legacy she created.
You know, what stands out right away, and you really have to understand this to get her later ethical choices, is the sheer scale of the barriers she broke through. Political, personal, institutional.
That crucible of her early life.
Exactly. It shaped her unique, uncompromising ethical approach to science, this absolute belief that knowledge has to be a universal, shared public good. And that principle, I mean, it literally cost her millions and really defined her entire life's journey.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Marie Skłodowska's early life, her nickname was Manusia. It was just defined by this constant struggle against oppression.
And tremendous financial strain. She was born in 1867 into a family that, they were minor nobility, but they'd been ruined by political misfortunes tied directly to Poland's subjugation under the Russian Tsar.
Her parents, though, they instilled this incredible intellectual foundation in her.
Oh, absolutely. Her father, Władysław Skłodowski, was a professor of math and physics. Her mother directed Warsaw's best girls boarding school. So this intellectual environment just meant Marie was, well, she was primed to excel.
And she did. She finished her secondary education with the highest grades, a gold medal at just 15 years old.
Remarkable, in 1883. But then almost immediately she hits this wall, this crushing political and social wall.
She and her sisters, Bronia and Hela, couldn't go to Warsaw University.
Why? Simply because they were women. Women were strictly forbidden from any higher education institution in the city.
And this wasn't just a sort of, a glass ceiling. It was intertwined with a much more brutal political oppression.
That's a key point. The Tsarist government's policy was Russification. The sources vividly describe the required humiliation. I mean, can you imagine this? Forcing Polish Catholic children to read their prayers, including the Our Father, only in Russian.
Wow. It's a systemic effort to just eradicate Polish language, Polish culture, your entire national identity.
Exactly. So education in that context, it wasn't just a privilege, it becomes an act of political resistance.
The form of rebellion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this atmosphere of resistance is what shapes her character. Despite the official ban, the educated women of Poland just refused to stop learning. Marie took part in the secret, informal Wolny Universitet, the free university.
So what was that like, practically?
She and her sisters, her friends, they'd attend these clandestine lectures, anatomy, natural history, sociology, often given by volunteer professors who were taking a huge risk themselves.
And this wasn't just a book club. I mean, this was incredibly dangerous.
Oh, yeah. If the police found out, you could be imprisoned. You could be exiled to Siberia. But they kept doing it, feeding their intellectual hunger underground.
Meanwhile, the family's financial situation just gets worse and worse.
It deteriorates sharply. Her father, he trusted a relative, lost all his savings in a disastrous business venture, and suddenly the family is destitute.
Which forces Marie, at what, 18?
Mhm.
Into years of working as a governess.
Grueling years. She started at the Zurofsky house, which was often isolated and miserable, all to support her older sister, Bronia, who was already in Paris studying medicine.
That period, it really seems like the crucible for that legendary sense of duty she had. She was living for everyone else.
She absolutely was. So much so that when Bronia finally invites her to Paris, which was Marie's ultimate dream, she initially says no.
She refuses.
Yeah. She felt she had this moral duty to support her father and her other siblings until they were financially stable. It's this self-sacrificial mindset that it becomes a pattern for her entire life.
It wasn't until 1891 that she finally gets to Paris and enrolls in the Sorbonne.
Aided in part by a small grant from something called the Alexandrovich Fund, which was set up specifically for outstanding Polish students who wanted to study abroad.
And when she arrives, she embraces this life of, you can only call it radical asceticism.
Painful asceticism, really. She lived in a series of these tiny, unheated rooms completely dedicated to learning. She talks about renting a 7th-floor room for 180 francs a year, and then later an even smaller, colder garret.
But she called that first room a palace.
She did, because it had a parquet floor and a window that closed tightly, which was a luxury compared to the rough farmhouses she'd known as a governess.
The sources detail this Spartan routine that was it was ruthless. She minimized every expense.
To the absolute bone. She walked everywhere, no matter the weather. She used the bare minimum of coal, carrying these heavy briquettes up 7 flights of stairs herself.
And she wrote in her notebook about shivering at her desk, her shoulders shaking from the cold while she studied.
Her focus was just absolute, sometimes dangerously so. Her diet, for weeks on end, might just be tea and bread with butter. She considered 2 eggs or a small piece of chocolate a rare feast.
It was a conscious decision, wasn't it, that the material side of life just did not exist for her.
It was, and she maximized her intellectual time. She'd study in the warm, gaslit St. Genevieve Library until it closed at 10 p.m. because she couldn't afford enough light or heat at home.
And then go back to her garret and work by a little kerosene lamp until 2 or 3 in the morning.
An intense, self-imposed scientific isolation. And despite all that, her academic output was stellar.
Though she held herself to these impossible standards, she finished second in her physics course in 1894, and she considered that a defeat.
She chastised herself for it for years. But that performance got her a French grant to study the magnetic properties of different steels under Professor Gabriel Lippmann.
And it's while she's struggling with this research, trying to find the right tools, the right collaborators, that her life takes this incredible turn.
Right. She wasn't looking for love or a partner. She was looking for a very specific piece of equipment.
An electrometer.
Exactly. In the spring of 1894, a Polish physicist, Dr. Józef Kowalski, introduces her to Pierre Curie. He calls him the continent's foremost expert on magnetism, and Pierre had perfected the necessary equipment.
Pierre at this point is 35. He's an established scientist. He's known for his work on crystallography, on what we now call the Curie point. But he was, let's say, skeptical about romance.
Deeply skeptical. He'd written in his diary about his pessimism, fearing that women would demand life for life's sake and distract a genius from their sacred work.
So what changed his mind when he met Marie?
He saw immediately that she was different. He saw this singular, fierce devotion to science, her courage, her independence. Their courtship, it really began with discussions of magnetization curves.
And ended with a proposal.
A proposal that was all about their shared scientific passion. He was so desperate to keep their partnership going that he offered to move to Poland with her if she wanted to go back.
He'd teach French just so she could pursue her career there.
Yeah.
That's commitment.
Not just to a person, but to a shared scientific future.
And their wedding in July 1895 just perfectly reflected their values.
Extremely simple. No white dress, no gold rings, no church ceremony. Pierre was a freethinker. Marie had drifted from formal religion.
She wore a dark blue woolen suit and a blue blouse.
Specifically chosen so she could wear it in the lab right after. The simplicity was absolute.
And the honeymoon. It's maybe the most charming detail.
They used a small gift of money from a relative to buy 2 gleaming bicycles.
And just took off on a tour of the Ile-de-France.
Yep. Packing only raincoats and some clothes in the panniers. Their first days as a married couple were spent cycling through the countryside, stopping to discuss crystallographic difficulties and scientific plans. It was a partnership from day one that was completely inseparable from their research.
So the Curies begin their life together. They're in this small, sparsely furnished apartment. They're balancing work and domestic life. Marie even passes exams to teach in girls' schools in 96.
which was a crucial income stream for them. 500 francs a month. It was their only steady income for a while, but their focus was about to shift dramatically.
Towards these mysterious, barely understood things called Becquerel rays.
Right. The foundation for this was laid in 1896 by Henri Becquerel. He was studying phosphorescence in uranium salts, something his father and grandfather had also worked on. He assumed sunlight was needed to activate the radiation.
But Parisian weather had other plans. And here's where it gets really interesting.
It's just a perfect story of serendipity. Because of cloudy weather in late February 1896, Becquerel just puts his experiment away. He stores the photographic plate in the uranium salts in a dark desk drawer to wait for a sunny day.
Days later, he develops the plate, expecting, what, a blurry image? If anything at all.
At most. Instead, the imprint was sharp, undeniable. He realized the uranium salts were emitting these rays spontaneously, consistently, powerfully, completely independent of any external energy source like the sun.
So Marie chooses this mystery as the subject for her doctoral dissertation in 1897. Why this topic? It was so new, so poorly understood.
Because it was a scientific vacuum. It was perfect for her kind of thinking, and her first, most critical innovation was methodological.
What do you mean?
While everyone else was just looking at the photographic effect, the blurry splotches, Marie focused on measurement. She used an apparatus Pierre and his brother had developed, the electrometer, to actually measure the radiation.
So this electrometer, what was it actually measuring that was so important?
It was measuring the effect of the rays on the air. Essentially, it measured electricity. The radiation passes through the air between two plates. It knocks electrons off the air molecules.
It ionizes the air.
Exactly. And that creates a tiny, tiny but measurable electrical current. And this meant that for the first time, radioactivity became a quantitative, measurable science, not just a qualitative observation.
She had the technique, so she started testing everything.
And she quickly confirmed two huge things. First, the emission was atomic. It was intrinsic to the element itself, not a result of how atoms were combined in a molecule.
Okay.
Second, she broadens the search and finds that thorium compounds also emit similar radiation.
So it's not just a weird quirk of uranium.
Not at all. Realizing it's a general property of matter, she proposes the term radioactivity, and she calls the substances that have this property radio elements. I mean, just naming it was a huge theoretical leap.
But the really game-changing discovery came when she was testing natural minerals.
A staggering anomaly. She discovered that two uranium minerals, pitchblende and chalcolite, were significantly more active than pure uranium itself.
How much more active?
Up to 4 times more active. That mathematical certainty just forced an inescapable conclusion.
There had to be something else in there.
Something new and something incredibly potent. Present only in trace amounts, but boosting the overall radioactivity way beyond what the uranium could produce.
So in 1898, based on that measurement alone, she dared to hypothesize the existence of new elements.
2 new elements. And you have to understand, that was scientifically audacious. It was borderline reckless by the standards of the day. The chemical community demanded hard-proof spectrum analysis, atomic mass, a pure sample.
And the Curies had none of that.
Not yet. They were using radioactivity itself as the primary proof of the element's existence. In July 1898, they and Gustave Beaumont proposed the name polonium for one substance.
Name for Poland.
A deeply patriotic political statement woven right into the scientific nomenclature of her adopted country.
And then just a few months later, the second one.
On December 19, 1898, they announced radium. Chemically similar to barium, they noted it was so radioactive that in its pure form, its power would be enormous.
And I did get a little bit of early confirmation from a chemist, right?
Yes, Eugène de Marseille. He registered the spectrum of its emission and spotted these new lines in the UV zone that got stronger as the radioactivity increased. It was the first little piece of traditional proof.
But to really satisfy the scientific community, they needed to isolate it in bulk.
Which created 3 immediate, excruciating problems: supply, location, and funding.
And this brings us to the most mythologized but also brutally real phase of their work, the 4 years in the shed.
For a location, the University of Paris just denied them a proper lab, said nothing was available. Pierre managed to secure the use of this abandoned, damp wooden shed in a courtyard.
And the sources confirmed just how derelict this place was.
It was abysmal. It had been used for medical dissections. It was literally deemed unfit for storing corpses. It had a leaky glass roof, so rain would fall on their equipment.
No proper floor, just asphalt over dirt.
And critically, almost no ventilation. The toxic chemical processes forced them to work outside in the courtyard most of the time.
It was stifling hot in summer, freezing in winter. She recorded the temperature in her notebook on February 6, 1898, 6.25 degrees Celsius.
And the physical labor was just unrelenting. Marie described processing up to 20 kilograms of raw material a day. She'd spend hours stirring boiling liquid in a cast iron cauldron.
This process she was using, successive precipitations. What does that mean for the non-chemist?
It's essentially fractional separation. Imagine you have a tiny pinch of salt mixed into a ton of sand. You can't pick it out.
Right.
So instead, you dissolve everything. Then you add a chemical that causes only the salt, or in her case, the radium, to drop out of the solution as a solid, a precipitate. Then you do it again and again, thousands of times, slowly concentrating the radium and discarding the non-radioactive waste.
And where did they get this mountain of raw material?
They learned that the radium was in the industrial waste after uranium had been extracted from pitchblende, the stuff that was being thrown away.
From the mines in Joachimsthal, Bohemia.
Exactly. The Austrian government gave them a ton of this residue for free to start, and later they bought more. They were literally sifting through industrial dust to extract an element that was less than 1/1,000,000th of the total mass.
And it took 4 years of this back-breaking toxic labor.
4 years. Finally, in December 1902, Marie isolated pure radium salts. Then she spent years more determining its atomic mass, providing that final, classical piece of proof the world demanded.
But before that, before the final proof, they made the critical ethical decision that would define their entire future, the patent.
When someone suggested they patent the complex extraction process, Pierre brought it up to Marie. Her response was immediate and firm.
Physicists always publish the results of their research without self-interest.
If our discovery is to have commercial value, that is exactly why we should not profit from it. Her principle was absolute.
Let's just pause on the weight of that. They were desperately poor, working in a shack, and they knew this had immense commercial value.
Gigantic value. Radium was already incredibly expensive. If they'd patented the process, they would have had exclusive control over global production. They could have become, billionaires in modern terms.
Instead, they chose poverty. They chose to continue struggling.
Absolutely. The principle was non-negotiable. Radium was clearly going to be used to treat the sick, and profiting from that human need was, in the spirit of science, just unacceptable to them.
So they published their methods freely.
They even provided detailed instructions to engineers who wanted to scale up production. And that decision, while noble, forced them to constantly struggle for funding and equipment for the rest of their lives. And it ultimately forced Marie to beg for the very element she discovered.
So the success, isolating radium, it was world-changing. But the work came at just a horrific personal cost.
The exposure to the very elements they had discovered was, well, it was slowly killing them.
The sources paint this really painful picture of their health decline.
Both of them suffered heavily. Pierre had these severe, painful episodes that doctors call rheumatism, but it was almost certainly acute radiation sickness. Colleagues noted his swollen, red, trembling fingers. He used to carry vials of radium in his vest pocket because they glowed in the dark.
Marie's health suffered gravely, too. In August 1903, she had a miscarriage after an exhausting bicycle trip. She was 5 months pregnant.
And she was working directly with concentrated solutions of polonium and radium every day. It's highly probable she had severe anemia, other hematological diseases, from this chronic exposure.
Their hands, the descriptions of their hands are just brutal.
Permanently calloused, burned, stiff. This long-term, unprotected exposure was ultimately fatal. We know Marie died of aplastic anemia, essentially leukemia, caused by the very thing she gave her life to study.
But formal recognition did finally arrive. In 1903, Marie, Pierre, and Henri Becquerel were awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics.
For their joint research on Becquerel rays, but they were already too sick to travel to Stockholm for the ceremony. Pierre didn't give his Nobel lecture until 1905, 2 years later.
And what's remarkable is the institutional resistance they still faced in France. It seems like recognition had to come from abroad before the Sorbonne would act.
That's exactly right. The sources point to this profound institutional inertia. It took the combination of the Davy Medal from the British Royal Society and the Nobel Prize for the University of Paris to finally grant Pierre a professorship in 1904.
And even then, he didn't get the lab he needed.
Not even close. He was given 2 small, inadequate rooms. It was a failure that became a source of profound, lasting regret for Marie after he died.
Which tragically was not far off, just as recognition was finally bringing some professional relief.
Tragedy struck violently. On April 19, 1906, Pierre was killed. He stepped into the road during a downpour and was run over by a heavy military equipment wagon. It was sudden, brutal, and just devastating for Marie.
And her response was characteristically austere.
She insisted on a simple, private burial. She rejected all the official ceremonies, speeches, delegations. Her immediate, unwavering resolve was to continue his work.
And the Sorbonne, maybe finally shamed into action, appointed her to Pierre's chair.
Making her the first woman professor there, shattering centuries of tradition. Her inaugural lecture in November 1906 was a sensation.
The hall was packed. Reporters, high society members. It was this bizarre collision of high society curiosity and groundbreaking science.
And in that lecture, she was already predicting the next revolution. She said radioactivity was creating a new chemistry, one based not on scales, which measure atomic mass, but on the electrometer, which measures radiation.
And this is the irony, right? She spent years determining the atomic mass of radium, only for new physics to soon prove that the element's identity wasn't its mass at all.
Exactly. And the next phase of breakthroughs hinged directly on the material Marie provided. She sent samples of radium to Ernest Rutherford, who she greatly respected.
But Rutherford realized the alpha particle, one of the types of radiation, was a perfect natural projectile.
A projectile he could fire at things. By aiming these alpha particles at thin gold foil, he demonstrated in 1911 the existence of the tiny, dense atomic nucleus.
And that is the critical turning point that redefines chemistry.
Yes. It establishes that the number of protons, the atomic number in that nucleus, is the definitive identifier of an element, not the atomic mass. Radioactivity forced scientists to look inside the atom.
Rutherford proposed the famous planetary model electrons orbiting the nucleus. But as classical physics understood it, that model shouldn't have worked.
That's the crucial point. Under classical physics, an orbiting electron is an accelerating charge, so it should constantly radiate energy, lose speed, and just spiral into the nucleus in a fraction of a second.
So if atoms work like that, the universe shouldn't exist.
Exactly. The stability of matter was an impossible contradiction. The resolution came from one of Rutherford's students, Niels Bohr, in 1913. He applied Max Planck's new quantum hypothesis.
How did the quantum leap stop the collapse?
Bohr proposed that electrons are only stable in certain specific orbits, and while they're in those orbits, they don't radiate energy. They can only jump between these discrete energy levels. It solved the stability problem and simultaneously explained atomic spectra.
So Marie's discovery was the shock that led, within 15 years, to the necessity of quantum theory.
And the final piece of the puzzle, the neutron, emerged later, still deeply connected to the Curie legacy. Rutherford hypothesized it in 1920, and his student James Chadwick experimentally confirmed it in 1932.
And how did Chadwick make that final jump?
He repeated an experiment that had been done by Marie's daughter, Irene Curie, and her husband, Frederick Joliot-Curie. They'd bombarded beryllium with alpha particles and seen uncharged radiation.
But they misinterpreted it.
They thought they were high-energy gamma rays.
Ugh.
Chadwick, knowing what Rutherford was looking for, correctly identified them as the missing neutron. He won the Nobel for it in 1935.
And the Curie legacy itself was already more than secure by then.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In 1911, Marie won her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for isolating pure metallic radium. She attended with her then 14-year-old daughter, Irene.
And as you said, Irene and Frederick went on to win the Nobel in chemistry in 1935 for discovering artificial radioactivity, just a year after Marie's death.
An unparalleled 5 Nobel Awards spanning 2 generations of one family, all stemming from that initial dangerous work in that leaky shed.
You know, Marie Curie's dedication, it went so far beyond just pure science. When World War I broke out in 1914, she immediately mobilized her knowledge for practical, humane application.
She was instantly pragmatic. She knew there would be a dire need for X-ray technology near the front lines. She predicted correctly that the war would be long and brutal.
And that on-site operations to locate shrapnel and bullets would save countless lives.
And prevent unnecessary amputations, which was a tragic reality for soldiers then. So she took immediate decisive charge. She didn't just donate materials. She became the operational director, the chief mechanic, and the driver.
Of these mobile X-ray units, the little Curies.
The petites Curies. This required immense bureaucratic fighting, a skill she'd unfortunately perfected. She personally secured the X-ray tubes, the dynamos, the cars. She challenged uncooperative military officials and traveled to numerous battle locations herself.
What were the logistical problems? I mean, this was cutting-edge tech that needed power.
Most field hospitals didn't have electricity. So she had a gasoline-powered dynamo built into the van to generate the current. But the biggest bottleneck was trained personnel.
So she started teaching.
She trained about 150 future radiology nurses between 1916 and 1918, simplifying the complex science to make it accessible. She was literally creating a new medical field on the fly in the middle of a war.
Her personal lifestyle during this period was a direct throwback to her student years.
Oh, totally. She slept rough, sometimes outdoors in a tent, endured Spartan, soldier-like conditions. Her simple, dark clothing meant she was often mistaken for a minor official by the elegantly dressed society women serving in the hospitals.
It's so revealing that despite this immense life-saving service, she received no great official honor from France.
And what's telling is her lifelong refusal of formal recognition. She turned down the Legion of Honor throughout her life, but friends knew the one award she would have accepted was the Cross of War Merits in 1918.
Which was never offered.
Never offered. It highlights how quickly her invaluable service was forgotten by officials once the crisis passed.
After the war, the need for radium for medical treatment radiotherapy became clear, but the financial consequences of her decision not to patent the process really began to bite.
This is one of the greatest ironies of her life. The U.S. had abundant, well-equipped labs and large-scale radium production, thanks to her freely published process.
But her own Radium Institute in Paris
Lacked sufficient radium for its own research? The discoverer of radium had none to work with because she had given the method away for free.
And it was a journalist, the very profession she so often avoided, who stepped in to solve the problem.
The persistent American journalist Mary Maloney. She befriended Marie and was so impressed by her humility and the poor conditions of her lab that she launched a massive public campaign in the U.S.
To buy Marie a gram of radium.
She successfully raised $100,000, an enormous sum then, to purchase it. It was presented to Marie by President Warren G. Harding at the White House in 1921, an act of global public gratitude.
But that American trip was just a profound physical and mental ordeal for Marie. She hated crowds.
She was genuinely wounded by fame. The sources describe her as overwhelmed by receptions, shaking from exhaustion. Famously, an overly enthusiastic admirer squeezed her hand so tightly she injured it. She had to finish the trip with her wrist in a sling.
Literally wounded by the public adoration she never sought.
Exactly. But despite that trauma, she made a second trip in 1929.
Why?
To fulfill her duty to her first homeland, she went to secure another gram of radium for the new Warsaw Radium Laboratory, which she had helped establish, fulfilling her lifelong commitment to her Polish identity.
As she moved toward her final years, her commitment to scientific freedom was really linked with this deep philosophical outlook forged by her youth under tyranny.
Absolutely. She maintained a strong belief in individual liberty. She flatly rejected dictatorship. She once told some French proponents of dictatorship, "I lived under political oppression. You have not. You do not understand your own good fortune to live in a free country."
She also rejected violent historical change. You will never convince me that it was useful to send Lavoisier to the guillotine.
Right. And her scientific ethics were tested constantly, even after her death. She and Pierre had discussed the dual nature of their discoveries early on. Pierre noted in 1905 that radium was like dynamite. It could build or destroy.
And that framework proved crucial years later with the work of Lise Meitner.
Lise Meitner, a longtime colleague, and Otto Frisch's theoretical work on uranium fission explained how the nucleus could split, turning mass into enormous energy. This knowledge was seized upon and led directly to the Manhattan Project.
And Meitner's response to the opportunity to join the project is so telling.
She flatly refused. She was an acquaintance of Marie, respected the Curie legacy, and she did not want to contribute to a weapon of mass destruction. Her refusal aligned perfectly with the Curie principle against using science to kill people.
But despite her unwavering resolve, Marie's body was ultimately failing her.
Decades of work took their toll. She suffered from severe ailments, double cataracts that caused failing eyesight, and in typical Marie fashion, she tried to hide it from her staff. "No one must know that my eyes are bad," she insisted.
The ultimate toll, though, couldn't be avoided.
The cause of death was aplastic pernicious anemia leukemia induced by the very substances she discovered. She died simply in Saint-Chelmals in July 1934. No official ceremony. Her coffin was placed atop Pierre's.
Her siblings threw a handful of Polish soil into the grave.
And the final tragic detail. The description of her hands, rough, stiff, and deeply burned by radium, finally at rest after a life of relentless service and sacrifice.
So when we look back, we see this life that was just an uncompromising blend of genius and self-sacrifice.
Her determination, forged in her oppressed Polish youth and hardened as a starving student, it just never faded. She traded immense comfort and fortune for scientific progress and absolute integrity.
From painstakingly isolating that tiny grain of radium in a leaky, poisonous shed to mobilizing X-ray units during a world war, she was constantly challenging the status quo. Whether it was political oppression, the exclusion of women, or the traditional definitions of physics itself, she was a revolutionary in a dark blue lab suit.
And her commitment to the public good was just absolute. Her refusal to patent their process accelerated the therapeutic use of radium globally, even if it meant that she, the discoverer, spent years traveling the world, physically ill, exhausted, begging for the very element she had freely given to humanity.
So what does this all mean? Marie Curie was a figure who viewed scientific discovery as a universal public resource. Knowing the immense human cost of her discoveries and the destructive power they unleashed, a potential starkly realized a decade after her death. Her story poses a crucial question for today's innovators.
If you possess knowledge that could instantly cure millions, but could also be weaponized to destroy entire cities, would you still freely publish the formula, believing humanity is mature enough to use that powerful, unpatented knowledge only for good?
Join us and keep your curiosity well fed. Who knows? The next video might be exactly what you didn't know you needed.